a difference, not only locally, but also globally for God's kingdom. Okay, I felt like I talked a lot and gave you a lot of information, but this is my favorite part of this morning's, especially this Sunday service, is because it's 3 for 1. And 3 for 1. And so if you don't know what 3 for 1 is and you're new to our community, 3 for 1, basically it's a special Sunday that we do at least twice in a year where we give people within our community the mic to share what God is doing in and through their lives. And I love these moments. It's powerful because it not only represents what God is not only is God moving and working outside in other places, but also it just reminds us that God is also working within our community, that he's working in the lives of the people that you're sitting beside, literally. And so we have the privilege of listening to Crystal, Lucas, and Sara, my good friends, people that I'm so proud of, people that I love, and just how I've seen them grow, so proud of who they are and what God's doing in and through their life. And they're going to be answering one question, and that question is, what is one thing that keeps them committed in following Jesus? And so feel free, take this time to lean in, open your heart, and also embrace what God has to share for you and for me. And so let's start off by giving a warm welcome to our very first speaker, which is Crystal. So we'll call Crystal, and then we'll go from Lucas, and then we'll go from Sara. All right.
Good morning, everyone. Whoa, okay, wasn't expecting that. Hello. Before I start, I do just want to give a big shout out, big thank you to my grandma. She should be watching online as long as she can figure out the technology. So thank you to her, and a big thank you to my friends who don't normally come to Forest City for adjusting their schedules, coming to be with me today. I appreciate it more than I can share. So if we haven't met before, my name is Crystal, and I have been attending Forest City for about 3 years now, ever since I moved from Victoria to the Lower Mainland. I actually joined a small group here at Forest City within the first 2 weeks that I lived in the Lower Mainland, so I really haven't known what life is like here without this community, and I am just so grateful for all the ways that it has played a role in my story ever since. But I have to be honest, when Jordan first asked me if I was interested in speaking today, my first instinct was to tell him no. My second instinct was also to tell him no. I even went as far as to actually give him other names that I thought he should ask instead of me. People who I thought would do a much better job than me, who had really great years, really good breakthroughs, because I really just didn't think that this year had done it for me, which I know is really setting us up greatly for the next 12 minutes that we have together. But I promise, I thought about the question, I reflected, and I realized that I did have something to share after all today. And that is that God has taught me to see his faithfulness in a completely new way. So what has kept me committed to following Jesus this year is discovering that his faithfulness has been there even in seasons when I couldn't feel him. This year, I really feel like God has taught me that his no's are just as loving as his yeses. And the verse that has anchored me through this discovery is Romans 8:28, which says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose." Paul wrote these words to believers facing persecution. And you'll notice he says the word all things, and that really means everything, even painful disappointments and unanswered prayers. Paul also uses the word no, and that isn't just wishful thinking, but it's confident assurance based on what God has already proven to be true. But I'll be honest, it wasn't until this year that I really believed the promise that Paul said in that verse. And to kind of walk you through this story, I'm going to start with my story just a few years ago. So about 3 years ago, I planned to move to Vancouver from Victoria. I had this really great opportunity to take a step forward in my career, and I had this perfect vision of what life was going to look like for me when I got here. I was going to live in this big, beautiful apartment in downtown Vancouver. I was going to have this busy social life. I'd be busy in the weekends and the evenings. And there were these really important people in my life at the time that I thought were going to support me. But little by little, those plans fell apart. I still got to keep that job, which is great, but Vancouver rental prices definitely caught up to me. So instead of that big, beautiful apartment downtown, I lived in a very small apartment in New West. The people that I thought were going to be there to support me, they stopped showing up, and I felt this deep sense of loneliness. Moving here turned out to be the hardest transition of my life. And the first year and a half here was absolutely brutal. There were many days where I felt like I had made a big mistake. There were days I couldn't get out of bed. I would cry, wondering why I had messed my life up so badly and why God would allow this. I prayed to God every day to give me a life that I had envisioned when I first moved here. I prayed for those relationships to be repaired and loneliness to be gone. Now, I was pretty reasonable with God, so I gave him that option, but I also gave him another one. And I said, you know what, if you won't let Vancouver feel like home, just let me move back to Victoria. Open a door for me or give me a clear sign that I could return to what felt safe and familiar. Nothing in my life was unfolding the way that I had hoped, and I questioned everything. And I felt distant from God and forgotten by him. And unfortunately, the hits, they kept coming. So while I was adjusting to this transition, this new normal, within 6 months of one another, both my younger sister and my grandpa passed away unexpectedly. I remember feeling like God had not only uprooted my comfortable life, but he had taken away the people that I loved most without warning or chance to say goodbye properly. Those were some of my darkest days spiritually. It felt like God had said no to everything that mattered most to me, the life I had imagined, clarity about my ability to make decisions, and keeping my loved ones safe. I felt confused, I was angry, and I often wondered if following Jesus was worth it when it seemed like my most desperate prayers were hitting a wall. But we're at the good part of the story, which is great. So slowly things have been different, and I am so grateful for that. This year, thankfully, and fingers crossed, there has been no major chaos in my life, no devastating losses, and no life-altering changes. And in this quieter space, God has given me something that I never expected, which is the ability to step back, reflect on that move to the Lower Mainland, and see his faithfulness in a completely new way. This year, I've learned to be grateful not just for what God has given me, but for what he's withheld from me. I've learned that his no was protecting something that I couldn't see yet. And looking back now, I can see God's hand in every prayer that he didn't answer the way I wanted him to when I first moved here. When I begged him to make Vancouver feel like home immediately, God said no, because the struggle of building a life here taught me that I'm stronger than I thought I was, and it taught me to depend on God in ways that I never had to when everything came easily. When I prayed to move back to Victoria every time things got hard, God also said no. And because of that no, I have developed relationships with many people in this room who have become some of the most meaningful relationships of my life. People who have walked with me through hard seasons, who I never would have met if I stayed in Victoria, but who have become the kinds of people I can't imagine living life without. This year, because I stayed in Vancouver, I've had a front row seat to watch my best friend navigate motherhood. I've got to know her son, I've celebrated friends getting married, and witnessed beautiful milestones that have shaped who I'm becoming. If I had moved back to Victoria like I desperately wanted to, I would have missed out on these important moments. When I prayed desperately after my sister and grandpa's unexpected death, God definitely didn't take away the pain. But through loss, I've learned how to grieve in a way that honors their memory, but still trusts God's goodness. I've learned how to love better, how to show up for the people who matter most, and how to comfort others walking through similar pain, because I've been there too. A couple months ago, I was driving to work. It was just like any other day. I was about to cross the Patello Bridge, but I suddenly felt this overwhelming sense of peace wash over me. It wasn't just contentment, but it felt like God himself was saying, this is exactly where you're supposed to be. This is the moment when everything clicked for me and God gave me clarity that changed my perspective. And I realized that I wasn't just surviving here anymore, but I was thriving and I belonged. And this place that once felt foreign had become home in ways I never could have forced or fabricated. In that moment, I felt such profound gratitude, not just for where I am now, but for the prayers that God said no to along the way. Every no had protected something and had led me towards something better than what I could have asked for. I prayed for that busy social life, and my calendar is full now, but instead of superficial busyness, it's filled with meaningful relationships and serving here at Forest City. I prayed to maintain relationships that mattered to me, and while some didn't survive the distance, I built stronger and deeper ones than I could have ever dreamed of. I prayed to God for a life that I could imagine, and instead he gave me one I couldn't even imagine, one that's richer and more purposeful than I could have ever dreamed of. This community, this sense of belonging, and this purpose that I feel here, I never would have experienced any of it if God had answered my original prayers to make everything easy for me or to send me back to Victoria. So the thing that has kept me faithful to Jesus this year is discovering that his love doesn't always look like getting what I ask for, but instead it looks like protecting me from what I think I want because he can see the bigger picture. And this brings me back to Romans 8:28. And in the verse, Paul doesn't say that all things are good, but he promises that God works all things for good. This means God takes every thread of our story, the beautiful ones and the broken ones, and weaves them into something purposeful. The God I've grown closer to this year isn't a vending machine who gives me what I want when I want, but he's a father who loves me enough to say no when he knows that his plans are better than mine. He is a God who is present in the struggle and who uses even the hardest of seasons to shape something beautiful in us and through us. Looking back now, I'm so grateful for the move that felt like a mistake and loneliness that forced me to build deeper relationships, both with others and with him. I'm grateful for losses that broke my heart because they taught me that God's comfort is real, even in the deepest of pain. And I'm grateful for the prayers that God said no to because his answers have been so much better than what I originally asked for. The same God who has been faithful throughout history is walking with me through every season of my story. His plans for me are good, even when they don't look like what I originally asked for. What I've learned this year is that his love for me is big enough to include both yes and no. Both are expressions of his care and invitations to trust him more deeply, because we know that in all things, even hard things, even the confusing and disappointing things, God works for the good of those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose. Thank you.
That photo is wild. Social media team, we got some work to do. Let me set up my iPad here so it looks like I know what I'm doing. That was amazing. I'm supposed to follow up on that. I told Joel, man, I said, put me first. Let me set the bar low. But female, male, female, there's optics. I get it. But then also these are the optics. I don't really get it. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lucas. I get the honor and privilege to serve on a couple of teams here. Coffee, photography, production. It's usually pretty easy to tell which team I'm on. If the coffee tastes a little bit too bitter, I probably brewed it. If the YouTube videos on like the preaching are too loud, I probably edited it in the back. And if the photos on Instagram are all blurry, that's probably because I took them. But when I'm not spending my time causing trouble up in this building, my day-to-day job consists of a lot of office coffee drinking, a lot of showing up late to meetings, but I also get to work with some of the larger companies here in Vancouver to help kind of solve their biggest strategic problems. And whenever like we work on an engagement, I always ask myself, like, how did these companies get to this stage? Like, how did they become so big? And how did it get there in the first place? And so I looked into it. It turns out a lot of it actually comes down to some investor in the very early stages making a really risky bet on an idea. And so I looked into it a bit deeper, and one of these guys who makes a lot of these bets, this guy's name is Reid Hoffman. He's an investor, a pretty famous one, and he's backed companies like LinkedIn and PayPal and a bunch of others that we might use on a day-to-day basis. And so one day, these three broke college students, they come to Reid's office and they pitch him this idea. They go like, we have this really great idea where we want to build a website where you upload photos of your home, and then people, like strangers, can choose whether or not they want to sleep in your home, and maybe as a return, you make them breakfast in the morning. So pretty interesting idea, and every investor in that meeting room passed on the idea. They said, it was unsafe, it's unscalable, it's just straight up weird. But that was kind of the pitch. And as many of you will know, like that company now it grew to be Airbnb. But everyone at the time said no, except for Reid. Reid said, yeah, I'm in. I'm all in. Let me invest. And so Reid, in 2010, he invested $7.2 million into this company, into these three broke college students. Today, Airbnb is worth $84 billion. That's billion with a B. So that's a multiple on his invested capital of about 11,704 times. So for every dollar he invested back in the day, that $1 would be worth $11,704 today. But here's the thing. In this world of investing, I learned, these people, they make hundreds of bets, and they expect most of their bets to go to zero, to just fail, and they're just hoping that they have that one bet that will hit, that one sort of home run. So that one home run would cover all the other 99 losses and failures. For every 99 failed startups, you're just hoping for that one Airbnb to deliver all your returns. You chase that one, and you cut the rest. And when I read that story, I couldn't help but think it sounds a lot like another story that I've heard before. And in Luke 15, Jesus says this: suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he puts it on his shoulders joyfully. He calls his friends and neighbors and together and says, rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep. I tell you, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to. Now, Jesus isn't guessing. He's saying this is what God is like. He leaves the 99 to chase the one. And honestly, like who does that? When Jesus tells that parable, the one sheep that wandered off, it's not just a nice story. It's showcasing us something true about God. He chases the one. But stay with me. Here's where I think it gets wild. My guy Reid Hoffman, he chased that one because he hoped it might be worth something down the line, 84 billion. That one Airbnb, he thought, maybe that's the winner. The other 99 companies, he knew, and most investors do, they know that they'll fail. And so those other 99, they get cut. And honestly, that's just smart business. But God doesn't just chase the one that looks promising. He goes after the ones that he knows are guaranteed to fail. And that's me. That's That's us. In Romans 5, verse 8, it says, "But God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." This isn't God waiting to see if we clean up. This isn't God saying, like, show me you're worth it, and then I'll show up. This is God saying, I already know that you're not. I know you're going to blow it. I know you're going to ghost me, fail me, fall back into that trap again and again and again. And still, he goes all in on us. He still writes that check. And it's not money that he's underwriting, it's blood. Isaiah 53 puts it like this: "He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed." Then it says, "We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all." Reading that in this sort of context to me is pretty wild, because God wasn't making a bet hoping for 100 times return or an 11,407 times return. There was never an Airbnb coming. There was just lost sheep. And still, he gave his one and only son. This isn't about, return on his investment. It's about grace. It's the worst investment on paper, but it's the greatest act of love in history. Now, don't get me wrong, I've heard all of this before. I grew up in church. I could quote John 3:16 all day long. God so loved the world, he gave his only son. Maybe I can't quote it. But I know it. And in this context, it just kind of hit me in a different way. There were some days in this year where I felt like a lost cause. Nothing dramatic, not in some movie scene type of way, but just the quiet stuff, being numb, being distracted, burnt out probably from all the coffee that I was drinking at work, but just going through the motions and avoiding God because I didn't want to face what was actually going on. And honestly, if I were God, I'd write me off too. But he didn't. He was still there. He wasn't passive, not disappointed in the corner. He was present. He was invested. He was still all in, doubling down on some love type of currency. Still going after the one. In 2 Timothy 2, verse 13, it says, "If we are faithless, he remains faithful, because he cannot deny himself." So let me tie it back to this question here. What's kept me committed to following Jesus? It's realizing that he never once considered quitting on me. Despite all my shortcomings, despite all my failures, all my losses, he stays. I flake, but he still shows up. I bring nothing to the table, and yet somehow he still picks up the bill. And I've learned, this world, it bets on winners. But God went in, he went all in on a world full of losers, knowing that return on investment, it would never come. But still, throughout that all, he chose me and he chose you. And look, I'm not gonna lie, I'm still out here looking for my next Airbnb. I still want that 11,407 times return. But if I realized one thing in preparing for this, it's that God doesn't invest in you because you're worth it. He invests in you because he is love. Thanks.
I'm sorry, I'm still not over the fact that, Lucas called us losers. But it's true, right? Thank you, Lucas. I needed that. Hi, everyone. My name is Sara, in case we haven't met. I can't believe I'm up here. But I guess we're here, right? Now, best believe it's as delightful as it is nerve-wracking. So stay with me in case I go off on a tangent. The Spirit's still speaking, okay? And I guess this might be the story of how I got up here. Whew. Okay. Back to the question. When I think about what has helped me stay committed to following Jesus, especially in this season, 3 words come to mind: surrender, trust, and obedience. Following Jesus hasn't always looked like certainty for me or having it all together. It's mostly looked like learning to say yes, like this yes, even when I didn't feel ready. Katie today, this morning, joked that she probably wasn't joking, but she asked me to lead the, what's that thing called? The team rally. Yeah, thank you. She's asked for a year, and it's been a no each time, and it's been like, how dare you ask me? Mostly, sorry, Katie. I didn't voice that to you, but that's what I was thinking. Now that we've got the confessions out of the way, let me give you a small but real, very real example of how I've had to say yes, even when I didn't feel ready, and have seen God actually move, aside from now. Now, my family hosts a very small group, very small. Every Tuesday, very small is very needed for this context because anyways, so we host it every Tuesday in our house. By the way, as a side note, and I probably shouldn't admit this, but I recommend hosting a small group because your house will look presentable mostly when the small group is in season. I might be joking, but maybe I'm not joking. Anyways, over time, we've fallen into our Tuesday rhythm through prep and actually hosting the group. My husband, Moses, will lead the discussions, and I'm happy to just sit and listen and never lead as a shy introvert, as expected, right? But in this past season, Moses had to take a trip away at the very last minute. Like, how dare they do that? And he was worried for some reason. And I confidently told him not to worry, that we'll be fine. Because in my mind, I only had keeping the kids alive and getting the house ready for hosting, right? And I'm not a planner that way, so that's all I had in my mind until later it dawned on me on Monday night actually, that what he meant was that I would be leading. What? Me? Sarah? Out of your mind. Anyway, through the panic and everything, I might have sent him a dramatic text wondering whether he could, come back and lead and then go back for the trip. But later he told me that he thought that I was offering to lead. First of all, how dare he? Anyway, Tuesday rolls around. I'm flustered, obviously, things aren't ready. And our people show up. I love my people. They show up and jump in and help get everything ready. And before we know it, the group is in. I led the discussions. I led. I didn't pass out. And I didn't die clearly because I'm right here today. But most importantly, I realized something. I had centered all my excuses and all my insecurities as if they needed to vanish before I could ever show up, before God could use me. I've always wanted to be that person with her ducks perfectly aligned. Yet lately, and for the past 8 years, if I'm really being honest, if you ask me, I have no clue where even one duck is. But I've waited for the perfect moment, and when I'm polished, prepared, excellent, and obeying God in these times during my feeling imperfect has often felt very paralyzing and anxiety-inducing. I hear his direction, and I prayed, Lord, how do I serve you like this? I thought what you want is excellence. And in a season of wrestling, God brought me to the story of Moses. Now, it's not Moses, my beloved, but the Moses in the Bible, that Moses. It's a coincidence. I don't jive with Moses that way, but anyway, the Moses in the Bible, the one in real life I jive with, oh my God. I'm sorry, Moses. Anyway, so, the Moses in the Bible, the one that God called in the burning bush in Exodus 4:1-17, if you would like to refer to it. The Moses who challenged God's call on his life as if God didn't know who he was talking to. And suddenly I stood with the same question in verse 2 of Exodus 4, echoing in my heart. What is that you have in your hand? I'd read this scripture before. Probably even I rolled at Moses for all his excuses. But learning to follow Christ in this season has brought that moment to life. See, when God calls Moses, his first response is doubt. It's questions. And then a sprinkle or a dash of more self-doubt. I may be taking a creative liberty here, but I imagine he listened to God and then turned the other way and said, yeah, you got the wrong guy. Find somebody else to do it. But I don't blame him because Moses didn't see himself as worthy. Not with his ancestry, no. Not with his messy past, definitely. And certainly not with his speech issues, as we would later learn. But God asked him in verse 2, what is that in your hand? And he asks not because he doesn't know what's in his hand. And Moses replies, a staff. Just a stick, dog. Maybe that staff marked him as a shepherd. Maybe it supported him physically, depending on his ability. But nothing more, nothing remarkable. Suddenly, he didn't think of it in any way other than that. And yet when that stick was surrendered in obedience to God's call, it became something powerful. It turned into a serpent immediately before his eyes. And later this stick, just a stick, turned water into blood. It stretched over the Red Sea and parted it and then closed it. It struck a rock and water came out of it. That simple stuff became an instrument of God's power. And still, Moses protests. He says, yeah, but I'm not eloquent. I'm slow of speech. Inside eye roll, right? How dare he? And God replies, as he always does for us. And he has for me. I'll help you. I will teach you. I'll help you. I will teach you. It hits home really deep for me. And I hope it does for you too. Because like Moses, I've missed where God's moving. Too focused on my own limitations and imperfections. I've been too busy with my own labels and my fear. And just like Moses, I could go on with all the excuses. Oh my God. But that question, what's that in your hand, has stayed with me, and as has the assurance that I'll teach you, I'll help you. I've been invited to pause, to take inventory, not just of my gifts and resources, but of the things that I've labeled as weaknesses and scars. The fear of failure that I wore like a trophy, the shyness, the past mistakes, the future anxieties, the just a girlness, waiting for the perfect time, the need to be super duper organized and perfect, the I'm not sure yet, and the endless search for the ducks to line up in a neat row. Now I can't say it's all butterflies at this point and that is all yes Lord all the time, because the stubbornness is still very much a work in progress. But learning to surrender, trust, and obey has helped me stay committed to Jesus, because I've realized my excuses are often just a form of self-righteousness and do not limit his power and his strength in my life. while there've been a way of holding on to control to prove something, I've also learned to let him be God in everything. Now, when I pray, Lord, where are you working? Where are you inviting me to partner with you? I try to trust that he'll empower me for what he calls me to, and that I'm not alone, that he is with me, because that's what his word says. And strangely, on the other side of the resistance, I found contentment and growth. I mean, how am I even up here right now doing this? It's flabbergasting. I've come to love the freedom and vulnerability of not having to be perfect. I just have to bring my willingness to God in surrender, in obedience, and he's going to do his thing for his glory. I once read a paraphrase of 2 Corinthians 12, 9 to 10 that stuck with me, and I'll read it for you. I don't know where I got this from. I don't know. I just have it. God's power is made perfect and on full display in our never enoughness. When we are weak, we are actually made strong in Christ Jesus. And really, that's the story of committing to follow him. God used Jeremiah, who said he was too young, David, a little-known shepherd boy, Timothy, timid and uncertain, Paul, who, messed up God's people. So it's his business and not my business. My business is to commit and surrender in trust and obedience. So for me, what has helped me stay committed to following Jesus is learning to surrender, to trust, and to obey, even when I feel so wildly unqualified. He has given me all I need to stay the course. He has not abandoned me. He is my strength. He is within me, and he is faithful. Thank you.
Awesome. Can we give another round of applause to Crystal, Lucas, and Sara? Thank you for sharing your heart with us, sharing what God's doing in and through you. And it's just a constant reminder of just God's faithfulness. When I just hear three of their stories, how God moves in personal and powerful ways. And the theme, just how God is faithful. Even, he's faithful even in the pain, in the struggle, even when we think that we're a failure. God is faithful in those moments. And so as we take time to respond, I'll ask you guys to all stand if you're able to. Have the worship team with me. And we're going to take a chance and time to respond to just the message of just God's faithfulness, his love. That when you come to him, he'll draw near to you. And so I pray that as we just reflect on the words that were spoken today, that I want you to know that God is worth following. He is worthy of your attention, worthy of your life, worthy of your affection. I love what Lucas said is because he gave us his all. And so I want to encourage you as we take this time to reflect on these words, on the message that was spoken. May you be encouraged to know that he is faithful in your life. And I pray that that would be an encouragement for you to keep going, keep showing up, and keep trusting on his goodness. So let's respond in prayer. And when also in worship, I'll call the prayer team up as well. And this is a great time for you to respond and ask for prayer. If there's anything that you need, our prayer team is more than happy to pray with you, to pray alongside with you. But let's just take time to respond in God's goodness.